Whispering Woods is expanding into Asia with a Himalayan-inspired gate, palace cat enclosure, and now a much larger and rockier habitat for not one but two species of hoofstock. Genevieve Joyce is excited to add to the Haven's animal selection, but also apprehensive about the time, energy, and finances required, sentiments Jonathan Vaughn, the accountant, shares. On the other hand, the head zookeeper Wesley Parsons is ready to dive in headfirst, and Imogen Chen, head vet, is prepared to research any new animals headed their way. With a new connection established, Sabina Maharjan of the Animal Conservancy Project is able to secure the delivery of both Takins and Markhors from various breeding programs in Asia. The Markhors, however, come with a price. Hamza Nuruzaman, the son of a wealthy politician who wishes to be the designer of this specific enclosure. Welcome back to Whispering Woods Wildlife Haven. Hey everyone, Sparrow here. We're back in Little Asia at Whispering Woods today to add the combined Markhor and Takin enclosure. If you're here from the last episode, the Palace's Cat, I know I said bi-weekly, but creativity just doesn't have a timeline, so here we are. I do have a few small breaks from work and life coming up, so hopefully that will also mean more time to build and catch up on the YouTube schedule. Which, if you're new here, I upload a new video every Sunday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time. That timing may be a little bit off depending where you are in the world, as we just observed the end of daylight savings time and moved our clocks back an hour. Yay for an extra hour of sleep. So really, you should just hit that subscribe button so you can get notified and don't really need to worry about time zones. And while you're down there, hit that like button because it helps the channel out and makes me feel good. What are we doing today? As you already heard, the Markhor and Takin will be making this enclosure their home, and I had a very specific vision for this build. If you watched the first episode of Little Asia, you will know that we are looking to represent many different styles of architecture within this section of the zoo. The gate is Himalayan inspired, the palace cat building is influenced by architecture found in Nepal, and the building and this facade that I'm working on right now will be inspired by architecture found in Pakistan. Why Pakistan? The Markhor happens to be the national animal of the country, and I also think it's a relatively underrepresented area of the world. The architectural style we're going for is called the Mughal-style, and you can find it not only in Pakistan but also Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and India. It was a style characterized by large bulb-shaped domes, vaulted gateways, and delicate but numerous ornamentation. You may be watching the speed build and wondering why I'm using so many pieces from the India theme, as well as this dark red color on the limestone. And for that, we'll have a short history lesson later in the video, so stay tuned. For now, I'm going to build this facade into the rocks. This big group of rocks that I'm copying over is one I built for the back of the wolf enclosure. I want to say this is one of the first times I've just copied and pasted a group like this. Normally I find it faster to just spam rocks everywhere. But in this case, I wanted the facade to sort of disappear into those rocks. So I placed the group and then went back to delete or move some rocks around, uncovering parts of the architecture that seems to be embedded into the side of this hill. The rest of the enclosure is going to be just as rocky, leading down over to the left side where the animals have a bit of hard shelter, as well as to a valley right by the path. This moat helps to keep the animals in, but also allows guests to either look down on them or to be basically at eye level, just from a distance, since I don't think anyone would appreciate being hit by a Markhor or Takin's horns. The animals will also have plenty of climbing space above the Mughal facade, thanks to this steel mesh fence that I'm continuing on from the wolf enclosure. This is the boundary line of the zoo, so it's meant to keep the animals in just as much as it's meant to keep people out. We unfortunately don't have a Markhor statue, but this Takin statue will make a nice transition from the palace's cat habitat on the left. Now, I do apologize for the next little bit of camera work, but I really wanted to make this building work as a bit of hard shelter for the hoofstock, while also housing the backstage for the palace's cats above them. Had to really play with the null barriers in order to do that, lots of zooming in and out and checking traversable area to make sure the animals aren't accidentally escaping, but we do make it there in the end. Really happy that I was able to make this happen, especially since this building is inspired by newer architecture, which generally has more than one level. On the other side of the enclosure, we're going to build a proper backstage building for the animals using some of the new zookeeper pole pieces, as well as some decorative African pieces. I just love the texture on these. I use them as flooring in SEZ and in the kangaroo backstage, I believe. But these made for some nice backstage fencing, super simple in this one, just 2 big stalls that the animals can come rest in, put some hay down for them as well. And to have a tiny detail, I sank this new piece from the zookeeper pack, the metal pole base, I believe, to create a sort of lock on this panel and make it seem like a door that can be opened by the keepers right into the pen. Before we finish up the building, I placed down the enrichment items. At first I didn't want them to take away from the architecture, but then thought it would be a cool viewing experience to have the scratching post right in front of the facade. Makes for some nice photo opportunities, that's for sure. As for terrain painting, I was kind of losing my mind trying to get the percentages where they need to be for the animals. Since this is challenge mode, I do kind of care about that, because I will probably be putting in way too many plants for their liking, so I want as many of the other needs to be as close to perfect as they can be, so the animals are still happy even with too many plants in their enclosure. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you may have noticed that I usually paint everything in soil for the building process, and then change it up later with the terrain brushes. Plenty of rock in this enclosure, some short grass, even some long grass towards the top of the ridge there. But for some reason, I just couldn't get those last few percentages down. Where is the soil coming from? Like, where is it hiding? I went over the rocks multiple times, underneath the buildings, even along the moat on the guest side. To this day, I still don't know where that soil is. But moving on, it's time to make this backstage building into a Mughal masterpiece. And alongside that, here is the history lesson I promised. Careful, Sparrow is putting her teacher hat on. So the Mughals were the ruling dynasty in India from the early 16th century until about the mid-19th century. They were Muslims, thought to be descended from the Mongols, ruling over a primarily Hindu population, with Persian as the official court language. So already you can hopefully see that this architectural style was influenced by many cultures. Being very rich rulers, the Mughals were big patrons of the arts. The Taj Mahal, which is probably the most famous example of Mughal architecture, was commissioned by them. While the Taj Mahal is white in color to represent undying love and purity, most Mughal architecture that you will run into is actually a deep red because it is made of red sandstone. The sandstone in-game is too light and orange for my liking, which is why I ended up going with the limestone recolored red. Hopefully this is making sense. Hopefully I haven't bored you to tears with the history lesson, but now you have a little bit more of an understanding why we're adding these ornamental columns, why we have that decoration on the front, why the plaster arches, and then also why we're going to be adding these Indian temple pieces and domes above. Now for a little science lesson, why red sandstone? The way this rock is created is actually kind of fascinating because it starts as a lightly colored quartz and turns red over time if it's in the correct arid environment. Small iron particles in the sand oxidize and form a thin coating on the quartz grains. They absorb all light colors except for red, which they reflect, which gives the sandstone its red color. It takes a long time to form, which, you guessed it, makes it valuable. As purple was the color of royalty in much of Europe because of its rarity in dyes, red is this color for the Mughals. Red sandstone is also very durable and weather resistant, which makes it last and further enhances that idea of power. These final pieces you just watched me create are for the 4 corners. We want more than just the central dome, but I didn't like any of the dome pieces. So once we have that on all 4 corners, I think we're done with our Mughal temple. We'll use the Indian fence with a metal bar as the guest barrier on the moat side. I use this piece to line the top of the 2nd floor on the building so it ties in nicely. It's not flexi-color, but it just so happens to match the red I chose for the sandstone, so that was a happy accident. Once we get to the planting, we'll definitely be putting way too many plants in here for their liking, but that's okay. I'm absolutely obsessed with the larch trees that are part of the Asia palette. The color is so pretty. And the larch tree is one of my favorites just in general because of the fact that it's considered an evergreen but loses its needles. It's just a very unique plant. There will also be plenty of Himalayan pines in here, some Scots pines, really going heavy on the coniferous trees rather than the deciduous trees. They don't require as much water and sunlight as deciduous trees to photosynthesize because they have thin needles, whereas broad-leaved trees need way more sunlight and water to live. Lots of fallen branches, and then lots of ground cover as well. Mostly some berry bushes, some ferns, some brackens, all of the regular things. Filling in this moat where the water might pool a little bit more, there will probably be slightly more vegetation there. And there's the view from our Little Asia gate. But we're not quite done building for this episode just yet because Little Asia is going to have its very own staff center. Right now we are quite a bit removed from that main staff village that we built all the way back in episode 6, I believe. So we need to add some buildings here in Little Asia. This place has everything from the quarantine to a zookeeper hut to research center, even a trade center, which I was today years old when I figured out that you can have more than one trade center in your zoo and people don't have to be running to the other side of the zoo to retrieve your animals. We are also building it in a more modern style, but still trying to keep with Asian elements, specifically elements of Japanese architecture. So we have lots of white, we have these wooden structures, very natural looking, using lots of natural materials. Might end up putting some foliage up on this conservation slat wall just to cover it up a bit and help add to that natural feel. As you can see, this staff area is also two-tiered, so we have the solar panel up on the second level, and that's just so it doesn't take up a massive footprint because we have limited space here in Little Asia. It's supposed to be little, it's not very little at all, but it will also allow our keepers to get into the enclosure that will eventually be on the right side. We're going to recolor the roofs to match the red of the Mughal-style a little bit more. And then, if you're still here, thanks for watching, and it's time to check it out. Welcome to Little Asia at Whispering Woods, where the newest habitat, designed by Hamza Naruzaman, contains the screw-horned Markhor and the gentle Takin. These beautiful creatures are right at home here in this rocky terrain and look amazing against the Mughal-style backdrop. Lit by these vintage-style lamps created by the lovely gecko, they'll be available on the workshop very soon. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Whispering Woods. I'm curious to know if you liked this style of episode, a bit more education heavy, but that's how I like them. Leave me a comment down below. Can't forget about our guests, some restrooms for them, and our staff seem happy about the new and close by facilities. No more running to the other side of the zoo. But let's not get too lazy, shall we? As more and more guests arrive, it's hard to say what the future has in store for Genevieve and her team. Are these new connections here to stay? Or just ships in passing? If you'd like to find out, hit the bell icon to tune in next time. And before you wander away, remember to leave a like. And I will see you next time. Bye.